Yes. It's Raphael Dawkins Combat Radio. And today, we're looking at Bob Arum's cheeky statement, which you can see here on the screen. He's trying to put his 80-year-old boot in on Eddie Hearn. Okay, so let's get into it. And by the way, if you like the content but have not already subscribed, please kindly do so. Okay, so on with the article by or relating to Bob Arum's most recent statements. So, here goes. Top rank CEO Bob Arum has taken a swipe at his promotional rival, Eddie Hearn, with respect to the ongoing drama related to last week's press conference, where Hearn announced that the heavyweight rematch between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua would take place on December the 7th in Saudi Arabia. Diriyah, to be precise. Is that the correct pronunciation? Diriyah? I think so, unless otherwise notified. Okay, so the statement goes on to say, it didn't take long before Ruiz went public and made it clear that he had not agreed to take the fight in Saudi Arabia. And for the moment, the Mexican boxer is refusing to travel over to Saudi Arabia. Bob Arum had promoted Ruiz for most of his career, but Ruiz parted ways from Top Rank earlier this year and signed on with PBC. Al Heyman, Premier Boxing Champions. Some people call it Premier Boxing Cult, but anyway, more of that later. So, back in June, Ruiz dropped Anthony Joshua 4 times in their bout at Madison Square Gardens to assume Joshua's belts and become the unified World Heavyweight Champion. Okay, so there's a rematch clause in place, with both boxers agreeing to the terms back in May. The terms give Joshua and his handlers the power to select the location and venue. Hearn has warned of a long battle if Ruiz refuses to move forward with the second fight. Arum explained that Hearn, who promotes Joshua, made a he says explain, but I will say claims. So, Arum claims that Hearn, who promotes Joshua, made a huge mistake by holding that presser before confirming that Ruiz was on board. Arum says, I think Eddie Hearn showed how stupid he is by making the announcement that the fight was in Saudi Arabia before he signed Ruiz to the specific contract relating to the bout, specifically in Saudi Arabia. Now Ruiz has him by the balls, claimed Bob Arum. Ruiz is in a great position because Hearn went out on a limb and announced the venue in Saudi Arabia. Ruiz, one country in the world he doesn't have to go to if he doesn't want is Saudi Arabia, because his own government said you're not safe there. And those were the words of Bob Arum. if Arum was still promoting Ruiz, he would be willing to accept the location of Saudi Arabia, but only if Ruiz received a lot more money than he's getting. Okay, so those are the words of Bob Arum. So let's chop it up. Bob Arum questions the contract, questions how much Ruiz is getting, says if he was the promoter, if he was still the promoter of Ruiz, he would let him go to Saudi Arabia, but only if Ruiz was getting a lot more money. So Bob Arum seems to be making statements that suggest or indicate that he is privy to the details of the contract. And my question is, well, how does he, what does he actually know about the contract? What does he actually know about how much Ruiz is actually getting? That he could say, well, he let him go, but it only for a lot more. Seems pretty clear to me that Bob Arum is just doing what he normally does when it comes to opposing promoters. And what he does is he stirs the pot. That's what Bob Arum does. He stirs the pot. And if there's room to stick his 80-year-old boot in, he is more than happy to oblige. More than happy to do so. So, what weight do I give to Bob Arum's statement? Well, yeah, it could be said that it was questionable to hold the press conference without both fighters present. But is that the first time? Excuse me. Is that the first time in history that it's happened? A press conference? Or could you call it a pre-fight press conference? It was more of a notification. It was more of a notification of the fight. And to make it official, the fight location, Diriyah, Saudi Arabia, introduce one of the Saudi backers representers. The guy was there to rep for the backers. Was he a backer himself? He may have been a backer himself. So really, it was a pre-fight press conference to announce the location and make it official. So was it really necessary that both fighters be there? We don't know what the fighters' calendars were like. We don't know that. So I don't see too much wrong with the pre-fight announcement press conference, which is pretty much what it was. It was just to get people acquainted and to make it official that the fight was indeed going to be in a location which is somewhat off the beaten path. But I wish everybody would stop trying to act like it's the first time a fight's being made in unusual territories. Have people forgotten about Zaire? Rumble in the Jungle, which turned out to be one of the most iconic sporting events in the history of not just boxing, but in the history of sports. Do people, or some people, conveniently forget or overlook the fact that every 4 years there is an Olympic Games, many of which take place in various parts of the world which are not particularly associated with high caliber sports. Have people forgotten, or do some people choose to overlook that fact? Rumble in the Jungle, The Thriller in Manila, both iconic sporting occasions. And who's to say that Clash on the Dunes in Diriyah, Saudi Arabia, might not be added to that list of classic fights in an unusual location. So, to get direct to the point, was Eddie Hearn stupid? Does Andy Ruiz have Eddie Hearn by the balls, as Bob Arum suggests? I don't really think so. Andy Ruiz was grateful, happy, probably had tears of joy when he signed that contract. But now, with the PBC behind him and a PBC representative in his ear, he's changed his tune. Seems like he's trying to play hardball all of a sudden. Well, if you don't like the contract, don't sign the contract. And once you've signed the contract, honor the contract. If needs be, Eddie Hearn's message to Ruiz can be, sign the contract or I'll see you in court. Very, very simple. And I could go in further on this, but do I save that for another video? Or do I touch it? Do I tickle it? Let me just give it a little tickler. Let's just say Andy Ruiz decides to stand down or decides he doesn't want to go. There's an easy way to do that. Just vacate the belts. Very, very simple. Vacate the belts and then carry on about your career. Where else are you going to get that kind of money? Where else is Andy Ruiz going to get that kind of money? So if he wants to vacate the belts and sit it out, well, that's on him. Because we know the IBF have a December the 7th deadline. They gave him a December the 7th deadline to fight for the IBF belt. So let's say he sits it out. Pulev, the IBF #1, has got ample time. I think it's like 16 weeks to go, 16, 17 weeks to go before December the 7th in Diriyah. They could call Pulev in and say, hey, Pulev, you want to fight for the IBF belt on December the 7th in Diriyah, Saudi Arabia? So there are options. Bob Arum's acting like Andy Ruiz has got Eddie Hearn with a vice-like grip to the ball area. But no, I've just highlighted one possible scenario where Anthony Joshua could still be fighting for the belts or a belt in Saudi Arabia, Diriyah, December the 7th, with or without Andy Ruiz Jr. If Andy Ruiz Jr. wants to go to court for breach of contract, then fair enough. I just hope that Andy knows that that kind of action requires money and may require Andy Ruiz sitting it out. Very unwise, in my opinion. These may be his prime years. Make hay while the sun shines. That's what I was told. That's what I was taught.